Imagine a night at a luxurious bistro in the heart of New York City, glittering lights, clinking glasses, and a billionaire's dinner interrupted by the unlikeliest of heroes, a homeless boy. What could possibly connect a man of immense wealth and influence with a boy who survives on the streets, navigating hunger and uncertainty? This story is more than just an encounter. It's about courage, compassion, and the extraordinary ways lives can intertwine when least expected. Today, we'll explore a tale of moral strength, a chilling betrayal, and the power of empathy that sparks transformative change. If this resonates with your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. Let us know what inspires you to believe in humanity. You could comment something like, "I choose kindness to create a better world." Let's keep the spirit of hope alive together. The scene was one of opulence, a high-end bistro nestled among the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan, where the hum of subdued conversation mingled with the clinking of silverware. Edward Holmes, a billionaire known for his sharp business acumen and public philanthropy, sat across from his elegant wife Sophia. Their table, adorned with an array of fine dishes, reflected a life of privilege. Yet, beneath the facade of harmony, an unsettling tension brewed. Liam, a boy no older than 14, lingered near the restaurant's entrance. His clothes were tattered, his face smeared with the grime of the city streets. He was accustomed to invisibility, to being overlooked by the polished patrons who passed by without a second glance. But Liam's sharp eyes missed nothing, a skill honed by years of survival on the streets. It was that very instinct that made him pause. He had noticed Sophia's odd behavior, her fingers trembling as she hovered over Edward's soup, furtively glancing around before slipping something into the steaming bowl. Liam froze. In that moment, the weight of a choice bore down on him. Should he turn away and mind his own survival, or risk everything to intervene? The decision was instant. Bursting through the bistro doors, Liam shouted, "Don't eat that." His voice cut through the ambience like a blade, silencing the room. Heads turned, and gasps rippled across the room as the uninvited boy pointed at Sophia. "She's poisoning it." Edward's fork clattered to the table. Sophia's eyes widened, her calm demeanor faltering as she stammered, What is this nonsense?" The restaurant erupted into chaos. Waiters froze mid-step, diners whispered furiously, and a wave of disbelief swept the room. Liam's heart pounded, but he stood his ground, his ragged frame a stark contrast to the grandeur surrounding him. "You've got to believe me," Liam insisted, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "I saw her put something in your soup." Edward, stunned, leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting between his wife and the boy. "Sophia?" he asked, his voice low and edged with suspicion. Sophia forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow. "He's lying. Why would I ever do such a thing?" Her eyes darted around the room, seeking support from the startled crowd. But Liam's resolve didn't waver. "Check it," he urged, his tone almost pleading. "If I'm wrong, call the cops. But if I'm right..." He let the weight of his words hang in the air. Edward hesitated, his trust in Sophia colliding with the undeniable panic flickering in her eyes. Finally, he gestured for a waiter to test the soup. The room held its breath as the dish was examined, and the truth revealed itself in the faint residue of a foreign substance, a substance later identified as highly toxic. Sophia's composure cracked. "It's not what it looks like," she began, her voice faltering. But the damage was done. The weight of her guilt hung heavy in the air, unmistakable and irreversible. The room erupted once more, this time with accusations and gasps of horror. Security moved swiftly, and the police were called. But amidst the pandemonium, Edward turned his gaze to Liam, a boy who had risked everything to save a stranger. "Who are you?" Edward asked, his voice thick with a mix of gratitude and confusion. Liam shrugged, his exhaustion evident, just someone who couldn't stand by and watch. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a connection that would alter the course of both their lives forever. As Sophia's chilling betrayal unravels, Edward is left grappling with the implications of her actions and the identity of the boy who exposed her. What secrets lie behind Liam's hardened exterior? And what happens when truth and morality collide with wealth and power? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into Liam's journey and the life-altering events yet to unfold. The police arrived swiftly, their flashing lights casting harsh, staccato patterns on the luxurious restaurant walls. Sophia was escorted out, her once graceful figure now hunched under the weight of exposed guilt. The diners, still whispering in shock, watched the drama unfold as Edward remained seated, his gaze fixed on Liam. The boy, though unkempt and clearly malnourished, stood with a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. For Edward, the questions were endless. Who was this boy? And what had driven him to intervene so fearlessly? Hours later, as the restaurant emptied and the gravity of the evening's events began to settle, Edward found himself sitting across from Liam in a modest cafe nearby. The opulence of the bistro had given way to the unpretentious warmth of cracked vinyl seats and cheap coffee. Edward's tailored suit seemed almost out of place here, while Liam blended in with an ease born of necessity. So, Edward began, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "Tell me your story." Liam hesitated, his fingers nervously tracing patterns on the table's surface. It wasn't often that anyone cared to ask about his life, let alone a billionaire. But Edward's eyes held no judgment, only a genuine interest that softened Liam's usual defenses. "I don't have much of a story," Liam said, his voice quiet. "At least, not one worth telling." Edward leaned back, studying the boy. "You risked your life tonight for someone you didn't even know. That says a lot about you." Liam looked down, the memory of the night's events still fresh. "I've seen too much," he admitted after a pause. "Too many people looking the other way when something wrong is happening. I couldn't do that anymore." And so, piece by piece, Liam's story unfolded. He spoke of a childhood marked by instability, parents who struggled with addiction, nights spent in shelters or under overpasses, and a world that seemed determined to push him aside. By the time he was 10, Liam had learned to fend for himself, navigating the unforgiving streets with a resilience that belied his years. "It's not all bad," Liam added, almost as an afterthought. "You learn to see people for who they really are, not just what they look like or what they own." Edward listened intently, his own life of privilege feeling increasingly distant with each word Liam spoke. Here was a boy who had faced unimaginable hardships yet carried a moral compass that shamed many in Edward's world. The conversation turned to that night's events, and Edward couldn't help but ask, "How did you know something was wrong? With Sophia, I mean." Liam's expression grew pensive. "People like me, we notice things others don't." The way she was looking around, her hands shaking, she was nervous about something. "And when I saw her slip that powder into your soup," he trailed off, shaking his head. "I couldn't stay quiet." Edward nodded, his respect for the boy deepening. But beneath his admiration lay a gnawing sense of guilt. He had built his empire on the backs of countless workers, amassed wealth beyond measure. Yet how often had he truly looked at the people around him? People like Liam, who lived in the shadows of the society Edward thrived in. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" Edward asked, breaking the silence. Liam shrugged, his casual demeanor masking the reality of his answer. "I'll figure something out. I always do." But Edward wasn't satisfied with that. For reasons he couldn't fully articulate, he felt a responsibility toward this boy, a desire to do more than simply thank him and move on. "What if you didn't have to figure it out anymore?" Edward said, leaning forward. "What if I could help?" Liam's eyes narrowed with skepticism. "Help how?" Edward paused, considering his words carefully. "You saved my life tonight, Liam. The least I can do is make sure you're not out there on your own anymore." The offer hung in the air, and for a moment, Liam said nothing. The streets had taught him to distrust promises, especially those that seemed too good to be true. But there was something about Edward and earnestness that made Liam want to believe him. "Why?" Liam asked finally, his voice tinged with both curiosity and caution. "Why would you do that for me?" Edward's answer was simple yet profound. "Because sometimes we need someone to remind us what really matters." The next steps were tentative. Edward arranged for Liam to stay at a modest but safe shelter while they worked out a more permanent solution. Over the following days, Edward found himself drawn deeper into Liam's world. He visited community centers, spoke with advocates for homeless youth, and began to see his city through a lens he had previously ignored. Meanwhile, Liam struggled with the sudden shift in his circumstances. The security of a bed and regular meals was a welcome change, but trust didn't come easily. He kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Edward's interest to wane, or for the promises to fall through. Yet day after day, Edward showed up, not just with material help, but with a genuine effort to understand Liam's struggles. They talked about everything from books to dreams, and gradually, a bond began to form. Edward saw in Liam a resilience and wisdom that belied his years, while Liam found in Edward a stability and kindness he had long stopped hoping for. The turning point came one evening when Liam, hesitant but earnest, shared his dream of becoming a writer. "I've seen so much," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I could tell stories that matter, stories that make people see things differently." Edward smiled, his own heart stirred by the boy's passion. "Then we'll make that happen," he said simply. But as the days turned into weeks, both Liam and Edward began to realize that this was only the beginning. The challenges ahead were daunting, from rebuilding trust to confronting the demons of their pasts. Yet, in their shared determination, a new path was beginning to take shape, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared belief in the power of change. As Liam settled into his temporary home, he found himself reflecting on the twists of fate that had brought him here. What would become of him and Edward? Could a boy from the streets and a billionaire truly forge a bond that transcended their differences? Little did they know, their journey was about to take an even more unexpected turn, one that would force both of them to confront the deepest truths about themselves and each other. Stay with us as the story unfolds, revealing how an act of kindness can ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. It had been a week since that fateful evening at the bistro. Edward Holmes, known for his meticulous demeanor and unshakable confidence, now found himself restless, replaying the events in his mind. He couldn't dismiss the haunting realization that someone so close to him, his own wife, had plotted against him. The betrayal was a wound that cut deeply, leaving scars not easily healed. Edward had always believed he understood the world around him. To him, people were predictable. Their motives, a mix of greed and ambition, had always been clear. Yet, as he sat in his sprawling penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline, his thoughts repeatedly returned to two people, Sophia and Liam. One had nearly ended his life, while the other had saved it. How could these two figures, both strangers in their own way, have such a profound impact? While Liam adjusted to his temporary new surroundings at the shelter, Edward began seeking answers. He hired private investigators to uncover the full extent of Sophia's actions. What drove her to such extremes? Was it hatred, desperation, or something more sinister? The reports that returned were shocking, yet illuminating. Sophia had been funneling money out of their shared accounts into a series of shadowy ventures. More troubling, however, were her ties to individuals known for exploiting vulnerable youth, a fact that hit Edward harder than he could have anticipated. The revelations about Sophia opened a Pandora's box of guilt and introspection. Edward had been so consumed by his empire, its endless meetings, acquisitions, and public appearances, that he had failed to notice the rot growing within his personal life. He had prided himself on philanthropy, on giving back to the community, yet here was a boy like Liam, living in the shadows of the wealth Edward had cultivated, ignored and invisible. Driven by a need to understand not just Sophia's betrayal, but the world Liam had come from, Edward decided to visit the shelter unannounced. When he arrived, the sight of the building, a weathered structure surrounded by chain-link fences, jarred him. Inside, the walls were adorned with peeling paint, and the air was heavy with the quiet hum of survival. It was a far cry from the polished boardrooms Edward was accustomed to. Liam was seated at a corner table, a notebook open in front of him. He was scribbling furiously, his face a mask of concentration. Edward approached cautiously, not wanting to disturb the boy's focus. "What are you working on?" he asked softly. Liam looked up, surprised to see Edward. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face before he shrugged. "Just writing some stuff. Nothing important." Edward gestured to the seat across from him. "May I?" Reluctantly, Liam nodded. As Edward sat, he caught a glimpse of the notebook's pages, filled with lines of vivid descriptions, dialogue and heartfelt reflections. It was raw, unpolished, but undeniably powerful. "This is incredible," Edward said genuinely. "You have a gift." Liam shifted uncomfortably, unused to praise. "It's just something I do to pass the time." "No," Edward countered, his tone firm but kind. "It's more than that. Your words could change people's perspectives. You've seen a side of life most of us can't even imagine." For a moment, Liam said nothing, his eyes searching Edward's face as if trying to discern the sincerity of his words. Finally, he spoke. "Why are you here, Mr. Holmes? Don't you have more important things to do?" Edward leaned back, his gaze steady. "I came because I realized I'd been blind to the realities around me. Meeting you forced me to confront things I've ignored for too long." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. Two police officers entered, their presence commanding attention. Liam stiffened instinctively, his body language betraying years of distrust toward authority figures. Edward immediately rose, intercepting them. "Can I help you, officers?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. One of the officers, a middle-aged man with a weathered face, glanced at his partner before responding. "We're here to speak with Liam. We have questions about his connection to Sophia Holmes." Edward's blood ran cold. "Connection? What are you talking about?" The officer hesitated, clearly aware of Edward's prominence. "We've discovered that Mrs. Holmes was in contact with someone matching this boy's description in the weeks leading up to the incident. We're trying to determine if he was coerced or involved in some way." Edward's shock was palpable. "That's absurd. Liam is the one who exposed her." "Even so," the officer said carefully, "we need to investigate every angle." Liam stood, his fists clenched. "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "I don't know why she'd talk to me. I didn't even know her until that night." Edward stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "This boy saved my life. He's not a suspect, he's a hero. I won't allow you to treat him like a criminal." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for Edward's intervention. Finally, the older officer relented. "We'll leave for now, but we may need to follow up." As they exited, Liam sank back into his seat, his shoulders tense. "This is why I don't trust people," he muttered. "No matter what you do, they always think the worst." Edward placed a reassuring hand on the table. "You have every right to feel that way. But I promise you this, I won't let them drag you into something you had nothing to do with." The incident only deepened Edward's resolve to protect Liam and unravel the full extent of Sophia's schemes. Over the next few days, he intensified his investigation, uncovering more disturbing details about her connections to unsavory individuals. It became clear that Sophia's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was part of a broader web of corruption and exploitation that Edward felt compelled to confront. Meanwhile, Liam struggled to reconcile his growing trust in Edward with his instinctive wariness. The shelter provided stability, but it didn't erase the years of hardship that had shaped him. Still, Edward's unwavering support began to chip away at the walls Liam had built around himself. One evening, as they shared a meal at a diner, Liam finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at him. "Why are you doing all this for me? You don't owe me anything." Edward set down his coffee cup, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe I'm doing it for you, or maybe I'm doing it for myself. Either way, I see potential in you, Liam, potential the world has overlooked. And I want to make sure you get the chance to prove them wrong." The words struck a chord with Liam, planting a seed of hope he hadn't dared nurture before. Yet, the path ahead was far from certain. Sophia's actions had set a series of events in motion, and as Edward and Liam navigated their newfound bond, they were both acutely aware that the truth could hold more surprises, both devastating and transformative. Just as Edward and Liam began to find their footing, A new discovery threatens to upend everything they've built together. What deeper truths will emerge, and how will they face the challenges ahead? Don't miss the next chapter as the story takes an even darker turn, revealing the complexities of redemption and resilience. The silence in Edward's penthouse was almost suffocating. The revelation about Sophia's connections and the police's unexpected interest in Liam had created an undercurrent of unease that Edward couldn't shake. Liam, too, was wrestling with his own thoughts, questioning how someone like Sophia could have even the faintest link to a boy like him. The pieces didn't fit yet, they had to. Edward pored over documents, timelines, and reports late into the night, a man determined to unearth the truth. Sophia, now in police custody, had remained largely silent, refusing to offer more than fragmented denials during interrogations. That changed when Edward received an unexpected phone call from his lawyer. "She's ready to talk," the lawyer said, his voice careful. "But only if you're present." Edward hesitated. Part of him wanted nothing more to do with her. Yet the other part, the one that needed answers, couldn't resist. "Arrange it," he said curtly. The next day, Edward arrived at the precinct. The sterile walls and flickering fluorescent lights contrasted sharply with the luxury of his usual surroundings. He was escorted to an interrogation room where Sophia sat, her once polished appearance now disheveled. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mix of defiance and something that resembled regret. "Why am I here, Sophia?" Edward asked, his tone devoid of warmth. "Why did you want me to come?" Sophia's hands trembled as she folded them on the table. "Because I owe you an explanation," she began, her voice cracking. Edward crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I didn't plan for things to end up like this," she said. "At first, it was just frustration, living in your shadow, always feeling like I was just a trophy. You have no idea what that does to someone." Edward's expression hardened. "So your solution was to poison me?" Sophia flinched but held his gaze. "I wasn't thinking clearly. The people I got involved with, they convinced me that I deserved more, that I should take control of my life. And then it spiraled out of control." Edward's voice was cold. "Who are these people? And how does Liam fit into all this?" At the mention of Liam's name, Sophia's face fell. "That's the worst part," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "They used him. I didn't even know who he was at first. They told me he was just a kid who could help us keep an eye on you, blend in, report back. I didn't think." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Edward felt a surge of anger. "You used a homeless child to spy on me. Do you have any idea what his life is like? What he's been through?" Sophia looked away, ashamed. "I didn't know. I didn't want to know. And then, when he exposed me at the restaurant, I realized he wasn't working for them anymore. He must have seen through it, seeing through me." Edward's mind raced as he processed her words. Liam's act of courage had been even more significant than he'd realized. Not only had the boy risked his life to save Edward, but he had also severed ties with the very people who had exploited him. Sophia's voice broke the silence. "I know you'll never forgive me, Edward, but I needed you to know the truth. I don't expect redemption. I just wanted you to understand." Edward stood there for a moment, his emotions a storm of betrayal, pity, and resolve. Finally, he spoke. "You're right. I can't forgive you. But I can promise you this. I'll make sure those people pay for what they've done, not just to me, but to Liam and anyone else they've exploited." With that, he turned and left the room, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing in the sterile corridor. Back at the shelter, Liam was pacing the small common room, his anxiety palpable. When Edward arrived, the boy immediately stopped, his eyes searching Edward's face for answers. "What happened?" Liam asked, his voice edged with apprehension. Edward sat down, motioning for Liam to do the same. "Sophia talked," he said. "She admitted everything. They used you, Liam. They used your circumstances to pull you into their plans." Liam's fists clenched. "I didn't know," he said, his voice trembling. "I thought I was just doing what I had to, watching people, reporting things. But when I saw her that night, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't be part of it anymore. Edward placed a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. You did the right thing. You saved my life, and you stood up to people who preyed on your vulnerability. That takes courage most adults don't have. Liam's expression softened, but the weight of his past decisions still lingered. What happens now? He asked quietly. Edward's gaze was firm. Now, we fight back. We expose these people and make sure they can't hurt anyone else. And we make sure you're never in a position where someone can take advantage of you again. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Edward's team worked tirelessly to dismantle the network Sophia had become entangled with. Police investigations expanded, arrests were made, and Liam became a key witness in exposing the group's operations. Through it all, Edward and Liam's bond grew stronger. They spent hours talking, not just about the case, but about life, dreams, and the future. Edward began to see Liam not as a victim, but as a survivor, someone with immense potential and an unshakable moral compass. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the city, Edward turned to Liam. Have you ever thought about what you want to do with your life? Beyond surviving, I mean. Liam hesitated, then smiled faintly. I want to write, he admitted. I want to tell stories that matter, stories that make people see the things they usually ignore. Edward nodded, his own smile forming. Then let's make that happen. But as they gazed at the city lights, both knew that the road ahead would be far from easy. They had won a battle, but the war against exploitation and corruption was far from over. Just when Edward and Liam think the worst is behind them, an unexpected twist threatens to undo their progress. What hidden truths remain, and how will their newfound bond withstand the challenges ahead? Don't miss the next chapter as the story delves deeper into the power of resilience and the fight for justice. The city buzzed with the aftermath of the revelations. News outlets swarmed the story of Edward Holmes, the billionaire who had narrowly escaped a tragic betrayal, thanks to an unlikely hero, a homeless teenager named Liam. Headlines painted him as a savior, a streetwise boy with the courage to intervene where others might have stayed silent. But behind the sensationalism, Liam grappled with a complex reality. The shelter where he stayed had become a revolving door for journalists hoping to catch a glimpse of him, their questions invasive and relentless. How does it feel to save a billionaire's life? What made you speak up that night? The attention was overwhelming, and Liam often sought refuge in the quietest corners of the building, clutching his notebook and pen like lifelines. Edward noticed Liam's growing discomfort and decided to act. One evening, he arrived at the shelter with an offer. Liam, he began, sitting down across from him. This attention isn't going away anytime soon, but we can control the narrative. Let's share your story on your terms. Liam looked up from his notebook, his expression wary. What do you mean? I've arranged for a public interview, Edward explained. Not with tabloids, but with a reputable journalist, someone who'll let you tell your story the way you want it to be heard. No sensationalism, no spin, just the truth. Liam hesitated, the weight of the decision evident in his eyes. Why does my story matter? I'm just a kid from the streets. Edward leaned forward, his voice steady. Because people need to hear it. They need to see what's happening to kids like you every day, what's ignored, overlooked. And because you're not just a kid from the streets, Liam, you're someone who made a choice to do the right thing when it mattered most. That's rare, and it's powerful. After a long pause, Liam nodded. Okay, let's do it. The interview took place in a quiet studio, far removed from the frenzy of the media circus. The journalist, a woman named Clara, approached Liam with warmth and respect, instantly putting him at ease. The cameras rolled, and for the first time, Liam shared his story in full, the struggles of his childhood, the harsh lessons of survival, and the fateful night that changed everything. I didn't think twice, Liam said when asked why he had intervened at the bistro. I just knew it was wrong, and I couldn't let it happen. It wasn't about being brave. It was about doing what felt right. Clara leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. What do you hope people take away from your story? Liam hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. I hope they stop looking past people like me. We're not invisible, we're not worthless. We have dreams too. We just need a chance." The interview aired the following evening, and the response was immediate. Social media erupted with messages of support, admiration, and outrage over the systemic issues that had left kids like Liam to fend for themselves. Donations poured into the shelter, and advocacy groups began rallying for change. But the most significant reaction came from Edward himself. Watching the interview, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Liam's words had ignited something within him, a desire not just to help one boy, but to address the root causes of the issues Liam had endured. The next morning, Edward called a meeting with his top advisors. "We're starting a foundation," he announced. "A real one. Not just a tax write-off or a PR move. This is going to make a difference." He outlined his vision, a comprehensive initiative to support homeless youth, providing shelter, education, job training, and mental health services. "And Liam," he added, "is going to be our first beneficiary and our voice." When Edward shared the plan with Liam later that day, the boy was initially stunned. "You want me to be part of this?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Edward smiled. "You already are. You've inspired this, Liam. You've shown me and the world what's possible when someone takes a stand. Now it's time to build something that lasts." The foundation launched with a modest but heartfelt ceremony, attended by community leaders, advocates, and beneficiaries. Liam stood beside Edward as he delivered a speech that was both a call to action and a tribute to the boy who had saved his life. "I've spent my life building wealth," Edward said, his voice steady but impassioned. "But it took a boy from the streets to remind me of the wealth that truly matters: compassion, integrity, and the courage to make a difference. Liam is the heart of this foundation, and together, we're going to create opportunities for others like him." The applause was thunderous, but for Liam, the real impact came later, in the quiet moments when kids at the shelter approached him with hope in their eyes. "You're one of us," one boy said, "and you made it." Liam's journey was far from over. He still struggled with the scars of his past, the moments of doubt and fear that lingered. But now he had something he hadn't had before: a future. As Edward and Liam walked back to the car after the ceremony, Edward placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "You've changed my life, Liam," he said simply. Liam looked up at him, a rare smile breaking across his face. "You've changed mine too." But as they drove away, neither of them could have predicted the challenges still ahead. The foundation's success attracted both allies and enemies, and the shadows of the past had not entirely been banished. Just as Edward and Liam begin to find stability, an unexpected threat looms on the horizon, testing their bond and their resolve. What sacrifices will they have to make to protect what they've built? Stay tuned as the story takes another dramatic turn, exploring the resilience of the human spirit and the power of redemption. The Edward Holmes Foundation, as it came to be called, started modestly but with bold ambition. Its first initiative was to transform the shelter where Liam had stayed into a state-of-the-art facility. Gone were the peeling walls and rickety furniture. In their place stood clean, well-lit rooms, a dedicated learning center, and spaces for counseling and job training. The facility became a beacon of hope in the city, a testament to what could be accomplished when resources and compassion intertwined. Liam quickly became a key figure in the foundation's work. Though hesitant at first to take on such a public role, he soon realized the power of his voice. His story, raw and unfiltered, resonated with people in ways that statistics and formal speeches never could. During a fundraising gala, Liam stood before an audience of wealthy donors, gripping the edges of the podium tightly as he began to speak. "I'm not here to ask for your pity," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm here to ask for your action. Kids like me don't need charity. We need a chance. A chance to prove we're more than the streets that raised us. This foundation is that chance." The room erupted in applause, but more importantly, pledges poured in. By the end of the night, Edward and his team had secured enough funding to expand their efforts beyond the city, setting their sights on other urban areas where homelessness among youth was rampant. But it wasn't just the foundation that was evolving. Edward himself was undergoing a transformation. He began spending less time in the boardroom and more time on the ground. visiting shelters, speaking with social workers, and listening to the stories of those the foundation aimed to help. He discovered a world that had been invisible to him for so long, a world filled with resilience, pain, and unyielding hope. For Liam, the journey was equally transformative. With the stability provided by the foundation, he enrolled in a creative writing program at a local community college. His professors were immediately struck by the depth of his work, his ability to capture the rawness of human emotion in ways that felt both unflinching and deeply empathetic. One evening, as he and Edward sat in the library of the foundation's main office, Liam shared a draft of a story he was working on. It was about a boy much like himself who finds an unlikely mentor and learns to trust again. "This is incredible," Edward said, setting the pages down. "You've got a gift, Liam. Have you thought about publishing this?" Liam shook his head, a shy smile playing on his lips. "I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe someday." Edward leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "When you are, I'll be your first investor." Despite their progress, the journey was not without its challenges. The foundation's rapid growth attracted scrutiny, and not all of it was positive. Critics accused Edward of using the initiative to repair his public image in the wake of Sophia's scandal. Others questioned the effectiveness of their programs, arguing that systemic change required more than just charitable efforts. These criticisms weighed heavily on Edward, but Liam was a constant reminder of why he had started this journey. "Let them say what they want," Liam told him one evening. "What we're doing matters. I've seen it. They don't know what it's like out there, but I do." Liam's words were a balm to Edward's doubts, and together, they doubled down on their mission. The foundation launched new programs, including partnerships with local businesses to provide job opportunities for youth transitioning out of homelessness. They also introduced scholarships, ensuring that education was within reach for those who sought it. But the most impactful change came when Liam began visiting schools to share his story. Standing before classrooms filled with wide-eyed students, he spoke about resilience, empathy, and the importance of looking out for one another. "Not everyone's struggles are visible," he told them, "but everyone's struggles are real. Sometimes just being kind, just noticing someone can make all the difference." These visits became a cornerstone of the foundation's outreach efforts, and Liam's influence grew. He wasn't just a face of the foundation, he was its heart, embodying the principles it stood for. Meanwhile, Edward faced his own reckoning. His involvement with the foundation had shifted his priorities, forcing him to confront the emptiness that had pervaded his life before Liam entered it. For years, he had measured success by the size of his bank account and the breadth of his influence. Now success was measured in lives changed, in the smiles of kids who finally had a place to call home, and in the quiet moments of connection he shared with Liam. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of Edward's penthouse, looking out over the city, Edward broke the silence. "Do you know what you've taught me, Liam?" Liam glanced at him, curiosity in his eyes. "What's that?" "That wealth means nothing without purpose," Edward said. "And purpose means nothing without people to share it with." Liam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've taught me something too," he said after a pause. "What's that?" "That trust isn't something you find, it's something you build. And you've helped me build it again." Their bond had grown into something resembling that of a father and son, though neither of them would have described it that way aloud. It was a connection forged in the crucible of shared struggle and mutual respect, a partnership that had defied the odds and transformed both their lives. But as the foundation expanded and their impact grew, so did the challenges. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, from bureaucratic red tape to the ever-present threat of those who sought to undermine their work. Yet, they faced it with a newfound resilience, fueled by the belief that change was not just possible but essential. As Edward and Liam continue their mission, an unexpected figure from Liam's past reemerges, threatening to unravel the progress they've made and forcing both of them to confront old wounds. How will they navigate this new challenge, and what lessons will they learn along the way? Stay with us as the story takes a deeply personal turn, exploring the complexities of redemption and the enduring power of hope. The transformation was undeniable. What began as an act of bravery in a high-end bistro had blossomed into a bond that transcended circumstances. Edward and Liam, two souls from vastly different worlds, had come to rely on one another in ways neither could have anticipated. Their relationship had evolved beyond benefactor and beneficiary. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and the shared pursuit of purpose. As the Edward Holmes Foundation expanded its reach, Edward found himself increasingly drawn to the personal connections forged through their work. He had once thought his wealth and influence were the keys to effecting change, but Liam had taught him that true impact lay in the small, human moments. Listening to someone's story, acknowledging their struggles, and offering not just resources but hope. Liam, too, had changed. No longer the guarded, street-hardened boy Edward had first met. He was growing into a young man with a clear sense of direction. He attended classes regularly, excelled in his creative writing program, and continued to serve as a spokesperson for the foundation. His speeches became more polished, his voice steadier, and his confidence grew with each passing day. But even as they built a new life together, the shadows of the past lingered. One evening, as they worked late in the foundation's office, Liam hesitated before speaking. "Edward," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you." Edward looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing with concern. "What is it?" Liam exhaled deeply, his gaze fixed on the floor. "When I was on the streets, I wasn't just surviving. I got caught up in some things I'm not proud of. People I thought I could trust. And now," he hesitated, struggling to find the words, "now one of them is back." Edward's expression darkened. "Who are they, Liam? Are they threatening you?" Liam shook his head. "Not yet, but I've seen him hanging around the shelter, asking questions. He's not the kind of person who lets things go." Edward stood, his protective instincts kicking in. "You're not facing this alone," he said firmly. "We'll handle it together." Liam looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "I don't want to bring trouble to you or the foundation. I just thought you should know." Edward placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've brought nothing but good into my life, Liam. Whatever this is, we'll deal with it, I promise." The following days were tense as Edward and his team worked to uncover more about the man Liam had mentioned. They discovered that he was part of the same network Sophia had been entangled with, a figure known for exploiting vulnerable youth and using them for illicit activities. His presence near the shelter was a clear attempt to intimidate Liam and potentially undermine the foundation's work. Edward acted swiftly. He hired additional security for the shelter, ensuring that the residents were protected. He also reached out to law enforcement, providing them with the information his team had gathered. But it wasn't enough for Edward to react defensively. He wanted to take proactive steps to ensure that no one else could exploit kids like Liam. At the same time, Liam wrestled with his own emotions. The reappearance of his past brought back memories he had worked hard to bury, moments of desperation, betrayal, and regret. But it also reminded him of how far he had come and the strength he had gained through his journey. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Edward's penthouse, Liam spoke candidly about his fears. "I keep thinking, what if I hadn't spoken up that night? What if I had just walked away like I usually did?" Edward turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "Then maybe I wouldn't be here," he said simply. "And maybe neither would you." Liam nodded, his gaze distant. "It's just hard, you know, knowing that part of me was shaped by people who didn't care about me. People who used me." Edward placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "That's what makes your story so powerful, Liam. You didn't let them define you. You took control, and you chose a different path. That's something no one can take away from you." Their conversation marked a turning point. With Edward's unwavering support, Liam found the courage to confront his past, both emotionally and practically. He agreed to meet with law enforcement, providing information about the man who had resurfaced and his connections to broader criminal activity. It was a difficult but necessary step, one that reinforced Liam's commitment to using his voice to protect others. Meanwhile, the foundation continued to thrive. Edward's renewed focus on its mission inspired his team, and together they launched new initiatives aimed at addressing the root causes of youth homelessness. They partnered with schools to identify at-risk students, provided mentorship programs, and even started a small publishing arm to amplify the voices of young writers, an idea sparked by Liam's own aspirations. For Liam, the publishing initiative was especially meaningful. He became its first featured author, releasing a collection of short stories inspired by his experiences. Titled Invisible No More, the book was a raw and poignant exploration of life on the streets, filled with themes of resilience, empathy, and hope. Its release garnered critical acclaim and brought even more attention to the Foundation's work. As the months passed, the bond between Edward and Liam deepened. They weren't just allies in a mission, they were family. Edward, who had spent years building walls around his emotions, found joy in mentoring Liam and watching him flourish. Liam, in turn, discovered the stability and encouragement he had long craved, allowing him to dream bigger than ever before. But their journey wasn't without challenges. The criminal network Liam had escaped from was still a looming threat, and both Edward and Liam knew that their work put them in the crosshairs of powerful enemies. Yet, they faced these challenges with a shared determination, knowing that their fight was bigger than themselves. Just as Edward and Liam find themselves on solid ground, a sudden betrayal threatens to shatter everything they've built together. Who can they trust when the stakes are at their highest? And what sacrifices will be required to protect the lives they've touched? Stay tuned as the story reaches its most intense and emotional chapter yet, exploring the unbreakable bond of chosen family and the enduring fight for justice. The Edward Holmes Foundation had grown from a local effort into a movement. What started as one man's attempt to right a personal wrong had become a nationwide initiative, with programs in cities across the country offering homeless youth a path to stability and hope. Liam's story had been the catalyst, but it was the collective efforts of countless individuals, donors, volunteers, and advocates that had turned the dream into a reality. Liam, once a forgotten boy in the shadows of the city, had become a symbol of resilience and the power of second chances. His book, Invisible No More, had reached bestseller lists, inspiring readers with its raw honesty and message of empathy. Schools and community centers began using the book as a teaching tool, sparking conversations about the systemic issues that left so many children like Liam vulnerable. Despite his growing recognition, Liam remained grounded. He often visited shelters and youth programs, speaking directly with kids who saw themselves in his story. He listened to their fears, shared his own struggles, and reminded them that their circumstances didn't define their worth. "You're not invisible," he would tell them, "and you're not alone." But with success came challenges. The Foundation's rapid growth attracted scrutiny from skeptics who questioned its long-term sustainability. Others, including those tied to the criminal networks Liam had escaped, sought to discredit its work. Anonymous threats were sent to Edward's office, and Liam occasionally spotted suspicious figures lingering near the Foundation's facilities. One evening, as Edward and Liam reviewed plans for a new outreach program, Edward received an alarming phone call. It was from a key staff member at the Foundation, who revealed that financial records had been tampered with and critical documents were missing. The implication was clear. Someone on the inside was working against them. Edward's face darkened as he hung up the phone. "It seems we have a traitor," he said grimly. Liam's stomach sank. "Do you think it's someone from them?" Edward nodded. "It's possible. They've been trying to undermine us from the start. But whoever it is, they won't succeed." The following days were a whirlwind of investigation and damage control. Edward's team worked tirelessly to identify the source of the breach, while Liam struggled with the idea that someone close to their mission could betray them. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A junior accountant in the Foundation's finance department confessed to being coerced by outside forces. The man, clearly terrified, revealed that he had been approached by individuals tied to the same network that had once exploited Liam. They had threatened his family, leaving him no choice but to comply. Edward and Liam were furious but also deeply empathetic. The man's situation was a stark reminder of how far-reaching and insidious these networks could be. Rather than pursue harsh punishment, Edward offered him protection and legal support in exchange for his cooperation with authorities. The incident only strengthened Edward and Liam's resolve. They redoubled their efforts, implementing stricter security measures and expanding their advocacy work to include fighting organized exploitation. Liam, in particular, became a vocal advocate, using his platform to raise awareness about the issue and push for systemic change. Amid these challenges, there were moments of profound joy. One such moment came during a gala celebrating the Foundation's 5th anniversary. The event was held in a grand ballroom, attended by supporters, beneficiaries, and media. As Edward took the stage to deliver his speech, he paused to acknowledge Liam. "This foundation exists because of one brave act," Edward said, his voice steady but emotional. "Liam reminded me, and all of us, that one voice, no matter how small, can change the world. Tonight, I want to honor him not just as our inspiration, but as our partner. Liam, please join me." The crowd erupted into applause as Liam stepped onto the stage, his usual shyness replaced by quiet confidence. Taking the microphone, he looked out at the sea of faces and spoke from the heart. "I never thought I'd be standing here," he began. "For most of my life, I didn't even think people noticed me. But someone did, and because of that, my life changed. This foundation isn't just about me or Edward. It's about every kid out there who's been overlooked, forgotten, or underestimated. It's about giving them the chance I was given." The room was silent as his words sank in, followed by a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very walls. In the days following the gala, donations surged, and the foundation announced plans to open 3 new facilities in underserved areas. But the true measure of their success wasn't in dollars or expansion. It was in the lives they touched. One of those lives belonged to a young girl named Maya, who had spent years in and out of foster care before finding solace in one of the foundation's shelters. Inspired by Liam's story, Maya began writing her own poetry, which she shared at a community event hosted by the foundation. Her work caught the attention of a local publisher, and soon, Maya became the foundation's 2nd featured author. For Edward, moments like these reaffirmed the importance of their work. He often reflected on how much his own life had changed since meeting Liam. The emptiness he had once felt, despite his wealth and success, had been replaced with a profound sense of purpose. One evening, as they walked through the city after a long day, Edward turned to Liam. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" he asked. Liam smiled. "All the time. I think about how scared I was walking into that restaurant, how sure I was that no one would listen to me. And then I think about everything that's happened since. It's unbelievable." Edward nodded. "It's a reminder of how much power one choice can have. You didn't just save my life, Liam. You changed it. And you've changed so many others." Liam looked up at Edward, his expression thoughtful. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said simply. Their bond had become unshakable, a testament to the power of kindness and the human capacity for transformation. Together, they had not only built a foundation, but also a legacy one that would ripple through generations, proving that even the smallest voices could create the loudest impact. Just as Edward and Liam begin to see the fruits of their labor, a shocking revelation threatens to upend everything they've built. Can their bond withstand the ultimate test, or will the past prove too powerful to overcome? Join us for the final chapter as the story reaches its emotional climax, exploring the triumph of hope and the strength of the human spirit. The foundation's success had become a beacon of light for countless individuals, but even the brightest lights cast shadows. Edward and Liam had built something remarkable together, a testament to resilience and compassion. Yet, as their movement gained momentum, an unexpected figure from Liam's past reemerged, threatening to unravel everything they had fought for. It began with a letter folded neatly and slipped into the mailbox of the foundation's headquarters. Liam found it one afternoon while sorting through correspondence, his fingers trembling as he recognized the handwriting. It was from Marcus, a man who had once been like a brother to Liam during his years on the streets. Marcus had taken him in when he was at his most vulnerable, offering protection and guidance, but at a cost. Marcus was deeply entangled in the same criminal networks that had exploited countless kids, including Liam. The letter was brief but chilling. "We need to talk. You owe me. You know where to find me." Liam stared at the words, his mind racing. The weight of his past, which he had tried so hard to leave behind, now threatened to pull him back in. He debated whether to tell Edward, but hesitated, fearing it would jeopardize everything they had built. For days, Liam carried the letter with him, unable to make a decision. The internal struggle was agonizing loyalty to Marcus, who had once saved his life, clashing with his commitment to Edward and the Foundation. Finally, unable to bear the burden alone, he showed the letter to Edward. Edward read it carefully, his jaw tightening as he set it down. "Who is Marcus?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with concern. Liam explained, his words spilling out in a rush. He spoke of the years he had spent under Marcus's wing, the crimes he had witnessed, and the gratitude he felt for the man who had kept him alive when no one else cared. "But he's dangerous, Edward," Liam admitted. "He's not someone you can reason with." Edward's expression softened. "Liam, you don't owe him anything. Whatever hold he thinks he has on you, it's only as strong as you allow it to be." Liam nodded, but the guilt lingered. "He helped me when no one else would," he said quietly. "I can't just ignore that." Edward placed a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. "You're not that scared boy anymore. You've grown into someone who stands up for what's right, no matter the cost. If Marcus wants to talk, we'll face him together." Despite Edward's support, Liam felt a deep unease as they prepared to meet Marcus. They chose a public location, a diner on the outskirts of the city. Marcus was already there when they arrived, seated in a corner booth with a smug expression that sent shivers down Liam's spine. "Liam," Marcus said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "It's been a while." Liam slid into the booth across from him, Edward by his side. "What do you want, Marcus?" Marcus leaned back, his eyes flicking to Edward. "You've done well for yourself, kid. Fancy foundation, big speeches. You're quite the hero these days." Liam's jaw tightened. "Just get to the point," Marcus chuckled. "All right, here's the deal. I've kept quiet about your past, but that's starting to feel like a bad investment. People are curious about who you really are. Liam, about what you've done. If I were to share a few stories." He let the threat hang in the air. Edward interjected, his tone sharp. "And what exactly do you want in exchange for your silence?" Marcus smirked. "Nothing unreasonable. A little cash, a few favors. You've got resources. It wouldn't even make a dent in your fortune." Liam's hands clenched into fists under the table. "You can't do this, Marcus. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect me to fix yours." Marcus's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. "You think you're better than me now? Don't forget who kept you alive, kid." Edward's voice was calm but firm. "Liam doesn't owe you anything. And if you think threats will get you what you want, you're mistaken. Whatever leverage you think you have, we'll face it head on." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his bravado faltering in the face of Edward's resolve. He stood abruptly, leaning over the table. "You've got guts, old man. But don't think this is over." As Marcus stormed out, Liam slumped in his seat, the tension leaving his body in waves. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Edward shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for. Marcus's choices are his own. We'll handle whatever comes next, just like we always do together." The days following the confrontation were nerve-wracking as Edward's team prepared for the possibility of Marcus going public with Liam's past. They drafted statements, gathered evidence of the Foundation's positive impact, and rallied supporters. But in the end, the storm never came. Marcus disappeared, likely realizing that his threats held no real power over the boy who had grown beyond his reach. The experience left Liam shaken, but also stronger. He had faced one of his greatest fears and emerged on the other side. His bond with Edward only deepened by the ordeal. Together, they continued their work, undeterred by the challenges that arose. Years later, as the Foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary, Edward and Liam stood side by side on the stage of a packed auditorium. The event was a testament to how far they had come, a room filled with lives they had touched and futures they had changed. In his speech, Liam reflected on his journey. "I used to think my story didn't matter," he said, "that I was just another invisible kid in a big, uncaring world. But I've learned that every story matters, and every voice can make a difference. The world didn't change overnight, but it did change. And it can keep changing if we all choose to see each other, to care, and to act." The audience erupted in applause, but for Liam, the most meaningful moment came afterward when a young boy approached him. The boy, no older than 10, looked up at Liam with wide eyes. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said. Liam knelt to meet the boy's gaze, his smile warm. "You already are," he replied. As the night ended and Edward and Liam looked out over the city, they shared a quiet moment of reflection. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but it had also been rich with purpose, connection, and triumph. "You've built something incredible, Liam," Edward said. Liam shook his head, his voice filled with gratitude. "We built it together." And so, their story became a lasting reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple out to change the world, proving that hope, kindness, and the strength of the human spirit could overcome even the darkest of pasts. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Share your thoughts in the comments below, perhaps a phrase like, "I choose hope and kindness to make the world better." And remember, together we can all create ripples of change. Thank you for watching.